You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Ladies and gentlemen, laddies, it is so good to be back behind the mic with you. I gotta say, it's been a busy last week for me. Last week was, I gotta say, an incredibly busy week. Now, for those of you who know me personally, or for those of you who follow this show, you know that I am honored to be a student at the University of Kansas, a university that I believe to be among the greatest institutions of higher education in America because of this town's and this university's history. Personally, for me, there is absolutely no other university that I would want to go to than the University of Kansas. There is no other university that I would want to be on my college diploma, degree, whatever, than the University of Kansas. I have been a Jayhawk fan since the day I was born. I was raised a Jayhawk fan. I was raised a Kansan. I was raised an American. Am an American. Am a Kansan. Am a Jayhawk. And I'm proud to call myself all of those things. It was Tuesday of last week when I was making my way over to the University of Kansas's football stadium to go on a little run. I've been trying to get in better shape. Need to. And as I'm making my way along campus to go on my run, I look up and I see a desecrated American flag flying on the grounds of my university from a flagpole in front of Spooner Hall on Jayhawk Boulevard. So I took a picture, I shared it in a private group with some friends of mine, and they shared it around, and from there, it kind of blew up. Fox News covered it. Campus Reform covered it. In fact, I think Campus Reform, either Campus Reform or Town Hall, might actually be among the first sources to cover it. So to Campus Reform and Town Hall, and to every other source that covered it, thank you. Thank you for covering it. So I took a picture, shared it with friends. They shared it, and it blew up. It ended up becoming a national story. It appeared on Fox News. They even pulled a quote from me, speaking in front of cameras, talking on Fox News. And I gotta say, it's not indicative. Flying a desecrated American flag. It is not indicative of what the University of Kansas, what the state of Kansas, or what the Jayhawker movement has historically stood for. Here's the article from Campus Reform. The University of Kansas is hosting a display on campus featuring an American flag that has been smeared with black paint by an artist as a commentary on the, quote, current political climate. The artist is being featured at KU as part of an ongoing project sponsored by Creative Time, a New York-based organization focused on 3 core values. Those values being art matters, artists' voices are important in shaping society, and public spaces are places for creative and free expression. All of which I don't disagree with. I don't disagree with that. Now, I think they might disagree with some of the art pieces I would like to see being flown at and sponsored by publicly funded universities. I think they might disagree with my analysis that even at KU, a university that represents one of the most conservative states, arguably, in America, Kansas, I think they might disagree with my analysis that there is political bias. Let's continue with the article. The flag, entitled Untitled Flag 2, such a creative title, was designed by German artist Josephine Mexeper and is being displayed in several locations across the United States, including KU, Cornell University, Texas State University, Rutgers University, and the University of South Florida. Mexeper's design is the only one in the project that has involved altering the American flag. Mexeper explained on the Creative Times website, the flag is a collage of an American flag and one of my dripped paintings which resembles the contours of the United States. It's an American... I'm quoting from the article for a second. It is an American flag. And no offense to your creative endeavors, I don't see the United States in your paint drippings. I understand what you're going for. I don't see it, though. I see black paint splattered on an American flag flying at a public university campus. But let's continue. She continued saying, I divided the shape of the country in 2. Again, it's really debatable that that's an outline of the United States. It just looks like splattered paint, but let's continue. For the flag designed to reflect a deeply polarized country in which a president has openly bragged about harassing women and is withdrawing from the Kyoto Protocol and the UN Human Rights Council, unquote. She continued, the black and white sock on my flag takes on a new symbolic meaning in light of the recent imprisonment of immigrant children at the border. Oh, but that is such a, unquote, by the way, but that is such a superficial view of what's actually happening at the border. And the UN Human Rights Council? The UN Human Rights Council features members that have an egregious record on human rights. So is it possible that the United States can still be for human rights and individual liberty and not be part of a council that sucks at its job? Qatar was elected to the UN Human Rights Council. They're a key sponsor of Hamas, a terrorist group. Cuba is part of the UN Human Rights Council. South Africa is part of the UN Human Rights Council. South Africa, a country that's had its political leaders advocate what is basically genocide against farmers, predominantly white farmers. Because, quote, according to an EFF leader, well, it's not really their land. What about Saudi Arabia? Why, they're also a member of the UN Human Rights Council, they don't exactly have the best record on human rights, do they? They don't have a great record of women's rights. In fact, the way women are treated in Saudi Arabia has been referred to by some as gender apartheid. The big one, China, is also part of the UN's Human Rights Council. And China has a lot of human rights issues. So, Miss Macsepper, perhaps your protest of leaving the UN Human Rights Council might be out of place. Perhaps your superficial view on what's happening on the border might be out of place. And you know, the only accusation that anyone ever brings forth about Donald Trump being a harasser of women that I've found, and you might hear me typing because I'd love to find other examples, is the whole grab him by the pussy comment that he made. Now, he's been accused of sexual harassment, but anybody can be accused of anything. You see, in this country, we're innocent until proven guilty, and we don't just believe the accusers. There are a lot of examples of people accusing somebody of sexual harassment, ruining their lives because of that accusation, and then being either going back on that statement saying, yeah, well, they didn't actually, or just being flat out proven wrong. But let's continue with the campus reform article, because we're getting off on little bunny trails here. The project, which began in June 2017, called Pledges of Allegiance, features 16 artists and focuses on one artist's work each month. Each artist designed a flag to highlight, quote, an issue the artist is passionate about, a cause they believe is worth fighting for, and speaks to how we might move forward collectively. Conceived in response to the current political climate, Pledges of Allegiance aims to inspire a sense of community among cultural institutions and begin articulating the urgent responses our political moment demands. Now, Campus Reform was kind enough to quote me in the article, and I feel like the quotes I gave are pretty indicative to still how I feel today. As a born and raised Kansan, and somebody that loves being a part of this university and loves being a Jayhawk, I find this to be the exact opposite of what it means to call yourself a Jayhawk. Unfortunately, you see universities across the country being overrun by far-left activists and postmodernists. This display is not representative of what the University of Kansas, the school I grew up loving and still love to this day, stands for. I want to quote somebody else in the article, a U.S. Navy veteran named Ian Appling. As a U.S. Navy veteran and student at the University of Kansas, Appling said, currently seeking my master's degree, I find the quote-unquote artwork that currently flies at Spooner Hall heinous and abhorrent. I do strongly believe in the United States Constitution and swore an oath to defend it, which includes the individual citizen's right to use our flag and an expression of free speech. With that being said, this desecrated American flag is currently flying on a public university's campus where Kansas and federal taxpayer money is sent to provide an unbiased center of learning and discourse. Any public space or property that shows bias of this proportion should have all taxpayer funds indefinitely suspended until proper action is completed, formal apology sent out, and all faculty involved should be thoroughly investigated and examples made of, quote unquote, from Mr. Ian Appling. And I think I agree with him. Now, the flag eventually got taken down and moved to the Spencer Museum of Art, just I'd say about a couple blocks away from its original location. Some context about the University of Kansas, also in a Campus Reform article. They write fantastic articles. I think you should go check them out. They did a piece on the University of Kansas's biases in 2010. So these numbers may have changed a bit, but as far as I know, they're still relatively the same, unless there are some secret conservative groups on campus that I just don't know about, and I'm involved in most all of them. The University of Kansas, located in Lawrence, Kansas, is a beautiful campus. Walt Whitman, the poet, described it stretching out on its own unbounded scale, unconfined, combining the real and ideal and beautiful as dreams. The school has much to be proud of. According to the University of Kansas's website, the school has been home to the scientist who discovered vitamins A and D, a Nobel Prize winner, astronauts, presidential candidates. It's a top 100 school. But it's not a place for conservatives. This article is by Jason Thomas, by the way. There are officially 601 student groups on campus. This was in 2010. I suspect that there are even more now. Out of those, 62 could be considered politically or ideologically motivated. By my count, of those 62 groups on campus, 41 of those 62 are liberal. Only 3% could be considered friendly to conservatives. Not even just conservative, just friendly to conservatives. A quick review of the SGA archive shows that in the 2009-2010 year, a hugely disproportionate amount of student fees went towards funding left-wing events and clubs, and I assure you, I am, as a student at this university, I am pretty sure that those numbers have either remained the same or risen since then. The misuse of funding for a recent in 2010 terms, quote, Queers and Allies Pride Week, was so disturbing that one student senator wrote about it on the SGA blog. So you have university funding and student senate funding obviously going towards left-wing events and clubs, to the point that a student senator that I identified themselves as being in support still of Pride Week called them out on it. At the very least, as his blog post on the SGA blog said, and you can find this article on campusreform.org, I don't want to release any names, he said that he's not opposed to Pride Week, but he still called them out on the inappropriate spending. In the blog post, Mr. Harris said, my speech was in regard to funding for Vogue Evolution, an openly gay hip-hop dance crew. I believe that of the 3 honorariums that Q&A wants to make part of their Pride Week, that group has the least to give KU as a whole, that this group has the least to give KU as a whole. In my personal opinion, Vogue Evolution is being brought to KU mainly for their entertainment value. Moving on in the article, the honorarium for this group, which totals $7,500, is being paid through funds allocated by Student Senate, the Multicultural Education Fund, and the Coca-Cola Foundation. The majority of the funding for this group and the event as a whole is coming from the two organizations that are funded through student fees. So, in the past, and even today, make no mistake, KU and our student senate and the university has had no problem advocating and pushing very left-wing groups, organizations, events, using student fees. Let's continue with the campus reform piece. In hospitality to conservative thought doesn't end with student groups. It is firmly entrenched within the professors themselves. According to the Huffington Post, 11 employees of the university gave $8,209 to GOP candidates in 2008. Compare that to 98 donors who gave $52,831 to Democratic candidates. That means of the $61,120 that was donated in the 2008 presidential elections, 86% went to liberal candidates, and 90% of the donors supported liberal candidates. So for all the campus's talk of diversity, there's not much diversity of thought among its employers. At the time of this article being written in 2010, FIRE.org, which is an organization called the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, and they what's the word I'm looking for? Well, we'll just go to their mission statement on their website. Their mission is to defend and sustain the individual rights of students and faculty members at America's colleges and universities. These rights include freedom of speech, freedom of association, due process, legal equality, religious liberty, and sanctity of conscience. The qualities, the essential qualities of liberty, that's what they say in their mission statement. And they, for free speech, rank universities by a color system. As I understand it, green, yellow, and red. I want to make sure on that. Let me make sure. Yes, green, yellow, and red, or a warning symbol. And the warning symbol being that they don't promise free speech on their campus. So a red light would indicate that an institution has at least one policy that both clearly and substantially restricts freedom of speech. A clear restriction is one that unambiguously infringes on what is or should be protected expression. So it's an institution that has a policy that restricts freedom of speech. KU in 2010 had a red speech code rating. Breaks my heart to see that. Thankfully, it's improved a little bit. Now, KU has a yellow speech code rating. A yellow light, according to the FIRE.org's database, says that it's an institution whose policies restrict a more limited amount of protected expression, or by virtue of their vague wording, could too easily be used to restrict protected expression. So not a lot better. Still gives faculty and administrators room to nudge the ideas and expression that they don't like out of the public discourse. Or a university could have a green light rating. It's a college or university whose policies do not seriously imperil speech. That college or university receives a green light, if that is the case. A green light does not indicate that a school actively supports free expression. It simply means that FIRE is not currently aware of any serious threats to students' free speech rights. So, in 2010, when this article exposing bias was written, the University of Kansas was in the red. Now it's in the yellow. Not a lot better, but just a little better. But when it was written, this article on campus reform, 7 infractions to free speech were listed, ranging from, according to the article, their discrimination policy to their policy of dissemination of information. Majors pose a problem for conservative students as well, besides the usual liberal majors such as women, gender, and sexuality studies, which doesn't belong on college campuses. Because it is the most useless degree that you could get. And African American studies, the University of Kansas offers a seemingly patriotic major titled American Studies. Now, I have friends that have been in American Studies. It's not. I'm saying this as myself. I'm not quoting the article here. It is not it's not patriotic in any way. The article says anyone looking for conservative ideas in this major will be sadly disappointed. A section on the official school webpage led Why Study American Studies? Students will find this little gem. Quote, given our recognition of the critical impact of difference and power in American life, we insist that a student's program consider the profound impact of diversity on society and address differential power structures in American life and social relations. American Studies, the writer of this article says, it sounds more like Karl Marx than Thomas Jefferson, and I'm inclined to agree. I love my university. I love my town. I love my state. I love my country. But I don't love what it's become. This university, that is. This town, that is. You know, not a lot of people know this because today, Douglas County, Kansas, the county in which Lawrence and the University of Kansas resides in, it wasn't always the blue spot in an otherwise almost entirely red state. In fact, Douglas County was one of the few counties in the state of Kansas that voted against FDR and Woodrow Wilson, two of my least favorite presidents. Douglas County, Kansas was consistently Republican all the way up until 1992. Now, of course, there were election years when they voted Democrat, as a lot of this nation voted Democrat at times in history. Voted for progressive policies at times in history. But it was pretty consistently Republican, conservative, until the Clinton days, until the Clinton era. And since then, it has been, well, it's been the blue spot in an otherwise red state. What happened? Postmodernism. Postmodernism has seeped into our American university system. Far-left radicals have taken over our American university system. And unfortunately, the University of Kansas was not exempt from that invasion. So the flag, the desecrated American flag, was removed from that spot, and it was moved to its very own exhibit at the Spencer Museum of Art on the University of Kansas campus. Moved from Jayhawk Boulevard to Mississippi Street, right next to the football stadium. I went in and I took a picture of it, and I noticed a very humbling note left by an 82-year-old man that was next to the flag at this exhibit. And I'll share that with you in a second. First, I want to share my thoughts about what I think about that. And I don't think there is a better representation of what I thought about that than an interview I did last week with 1320 KLWN and FM 1017 in Lawrence, where I said this.
Look, I'm happy to see it taken down. Personally, I don't think the artist's goal of starting a conversation, because that's what she said her goal was in putting the defacement up, I don't think her goal in starting a conversation worked exactly. It got people talking. It got people talking, make no mistake there, but I don't know that conversations were actually started because of it. Because if you look at the artist's comments, and you look at some of the comments from people who were in support of the flag, man, it just feels like it demonizes one side over the other. When I went back to the flag after it had been taken down, I tried to strike up a conversation about it with a leftist protester yesterday evening, right? And he said he wouldn't talk to me because he had recognized me, in short, I'm paraphrasing, my affiliation with conservative groups on campus, and because he had seen my quotes to the media. And he wore a resist shirt. He had a sign that praised the defaced flag. And in quotes to the media, he claimed that the university was strong-armed by, quote, one powerful white man, our governor. That's not indicative of a conversation starter, in my view. That's indicative of one side determining that the other side is evil. And we can't demonize each other like this. We have, love of country, in my view. Love of country isn't something that should be a partisan issue. As a free speech supporter, right? Sure. It's not that I don't think it has a right to be on campus. And I was talking with a friend about this the other day. It's not that I don't think it has a right to be on campus, and it's not that I don't think that, artists shouldn't have free expression to express their art. I'm an absolutist when it comes to free speech. I think even the most offensive speech should be protected. But from a personal viewpoint, because of the principles that the Jayhawker movement of the Bleeding Kansas era during the Civil War times stood for, those principles being, they were a freedom fighting movement, right? They were a freedom fighting movement that fought against slavery, that fought for freedom, that fought for individual liberties. And to see a flag like that flying on Jayhawk Boulevard, a defaced American flag, when the Jayhawker movement, in my view, represents American values, or what American values are supposed to be, I think it is counter to what it means to call yourself a Jayhawk.
The note that was left in a notebook next to the defaced flag, and it was a notebook that I think that the museum laid out for people to write in, featured a message from an 82-year-old, and this is what it said. Now, I might have to skip a word here because a couple words here are illegible because it's in handwriting, kind of chicken scratch, but it's a great message that he gives. Quote, "I have always valued our flag, as I was carefully taught. My uncles died in WW2. Unquote for a second. There's a word here that I can't make out because it's in the writer's own handwriting, and I can't make it out for the life of me. But I think he's also saying that he had uncles die in Korea too. Continuing on. I cringed when I first saw this flag. But I cringe daily in what is happening to our nation daily and to its symbol. So sad. Aged 82. I love my university. I love being a Jayhawk. I just know that a defacement of a symbol that represents America's values is not what it means to call yourself a Jayhawk. Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Go KU. As this upcoming semester comes up and I enter another year as a student at the University of Kansas, I go in with a renewed sense of understanding, I suppose, of what it means to call yourself a Jayhawk and what it means to what I guess the importance of saving our institutions of higher education, because they are rife with postmodernism and far leftism. In one of the comments on this story, I don't remember which news site it was, but somebody said, well, there's a university I'll never send my kids to. Made me a little sad. Made me a little sad that that's how the university I love is being viewed now. Because it's a great university that deserves to be saved from postmodernism, that deserves to be saved from the far left activists who don't care about the furtherment of intellectualism or the advancement of knowledge, or what institutions of higher education are supposed to be about. I encourage people, because it seems to be a common phrase or idea that I've heard from people more so on the right-wing side, saying, oh, if this is what universities and colleges stand for, my kid's never going to one. And I couldn't be more against this idea. Now, don't mistake what I'm saying here. You know, college isn't for everyone. Some people go to technical schools. Some people become welders. Some people work in construction. There's nothing wrong with following a different life path. But I do find it wrong to give up on institutions of higher education because they've been infiltrated or they're rife with far left activism or postmodernism, rather than give up on them. Why not go to them and try to save them, try to bring your ideas into the marketplace of ideas? Why not try to save them? KU isn't the only university that is facing these anti-American sentiments right now. Campus Reform just today released another article entitled "School-Funded Group Shares Video Calling National Anthem Racist." The Student Activities and Leadership Development Organization at the University of Cincinnati recently shared a video on its Facebook page claiming that the national anthem is racist. This article by Kevin Fairchild. The increasingly hostile political discourse that has emerged over the past few years has made everything fair game for controversial partisanship. The national anthem is no different, as the culture war between President Trump and the NFL remains a topic of discussion. However, the mainstream position of the anthem protesters is that it is not the anthem itself that the players disagree with, rather than it being a way to bring awareness to racial inequality. Both sides can and have gone all day about this issue, each all the while raising fair points. At least we can all agree the question arises with the application of ideals being practiced, and not the ideals themselves, right? Well, wrong. And the Student Activities and Leadership Development Organization at the University of Cincinnati wants to make sure you know that the national anthem not only should be questioned, but immediately dismissed as racist. On July 12th, at around 5 p.m., the Facebook account of the University of Cincinnati Student Activities and Leadership Development shared a video from Root, an organization not affiliated with the University of Cincinnati, that explains how America's national anthem is racist. Some may remember about 2 months ago, the same university account shared an anti-Israel post. Well, that's worth noting. Continuing, just as the United States was set to open its embassy in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. In the video shared by the account, the speaker points out that the national anthem we sing today was altered from the original text by omitting one stanza. This line referenced former slaves fighting for the British War of 1812. The video cited only the one long-since omitted stanza and Francis Scott Key's status as a slaveholder as evidence that the entire song is racist. The main problem with this post is that an organization that is supposed to be promoting student engagement, fostering a sense of community, providing opportunities of student growth and leadership development, quote unquote, at the University of Cincinnati is simply being used to promote partisan ideals and further a one-sided political agenda. SALD receives university funding and is not a political group, making it unjustifiable to share posts that are so obviously politically motivated. Before we go any further, by the way, I want to thank Grace. If you're listening and I mispronounce your name, I'm sorry. Grace Gottschling. She's an investigative reporter with Campus Reform, and she's the one who reached out and wrote the story on the desecrated flag at KU. So I want to thank you for that, for actually writing the story on it, and thank all the other news outlets that covered it. Campus Reform is a great organization. They're doing great work at exposing the leftist bias at these universities across the country. Another person doing a great job of exposing leftist bias, not only leftist bias, I got in mind, but also threats of violence from the left against himself, is Mr. Steven Crowder of Louder with Crowder. You can watch his show on CRTV. He does a great job. He does this show called Change My Mind. Not a lot of people in media are willing to actually do these unedited, long-form interviews where you just sit down on the side of the street with people you disagree with and just talk. Bring up an issue, change my mind. Unedited, long-form, unedited. You disagree with me, I'm giving you a platform, change my mind, respectably. No calls for violence, none of that. Not a lot of you don't see that a lot in media anymore, and it's a shame because those are some of the most interesting videos. Those are some of the most I would argue I would argue on the entire internet. At least in the mainstream. Well, you can't say mainstream media, but at least in media as a whole, that somebody's actually willing to sit down in a vulnerable position, mind you. You're out in public and talk about these issues. And we have a lot of reactionaries and collectivists in our country today that, for lack of a better phrase, react violently and hysterically in the bad way, towards simple opinions that they might disagree with. So Crowder did a Change My Mind video. Had a wonderful discussion with a male to female transgender who is running for city council, I believe. And while he's having this completely thoughtful, civil discussion, people start tweeting out his location and saying, advocating for violence, plotting violence against him and his crew. People saying firebomb his van. And one guy saying slash his tires. Well, they found this guy, and they ended up tracking him down. And when they tracked him down, they were very respectable and responsible about this. Absolutely no threats of violence from their side. They blurred out the guy that was threatening violence. They blurred out his name. The guy that was threatening to and telling people to, hey, go out and, this is where this guy is, go out and slash his tires. Blurred his name out, blurred like his personal Facebook page out, and beeped out his name when they were talking about him live, which I think is great. You don't want this guy. You don't want this guy attacked, even though he threatened you, basically, advocated for violence against you, and admitted to it on camera. We'll get to that. Completely respectable on the side of Louder with Crowder. So he confronts this guy, and this is what happens.
Austin, Texas. A city of great coffee, great food, great conversation, and people who want to vandalize our property and see us die. He's just your local transgender juice barista who calls for acts of violence in his spare time. What kinds of acts? Like publicly posting our specific location with calls to visit us, slash our tires, and teach us lessons ensuring that we'll never make ourselves vulnerable again. How do we know that he, she, Z meant business? Because he, she, Z said so while recruiting the same friends who helped him deface the Robert E. Lee statue at UT. Silly. That's a crime too. Oh well. Civility's great, but you plot violence, it's time to confront.
Hey, kid.
No? Do you remember?
Now, watching this, you can just tell this kid is absolutely in panic mode internally.
Me at all? Steven Crowder at all? No, not familiar? This is you threatening to slash my tires here? Remember this? Slashing my tires, and actually, funny enough, also the Robert E. Lee statue seems you helped defame.
We're trying to work.
Let me ask you, why do you think it's okay to threaten to slash someone's tires?
Hey, I didn't do it.
Predictable, Z. The first instinct is always denial. But why did you do this, though, man? You realize that you put our crew in danger. Lucky for us, we had a Bristol board. How about you check this out here? Before we'll leave this. Yeah. I'm a conservative who has a difference of opinion from you, and I've never threatened actions of violence. I've never threatened to slash anyone's tires.
You need to get out, or we're going to call the police.
You know what? Let's call the police officers. Because matter of fact, we actually have it. No. Actually, I would like to speak with the police. We're about to file a report very soon.
Okay, you should do that, man.
Listen, this is a part of being a man, is owning up to the actions here. When you threaten violence against someone, part of being a man is taking ownership of your actions, taking responsibility.
You said you would come back when I was off work.
I will, but could you just? But I don't believe you're going to be here because you're a dishonest human being. You said you didn't even post this and acted like you didn't know me. I think you're a liar.
I think you need to go.
Well, let me ask you this. Could you just say, hey, you're sorry, take this down? Could you take this down? Could you take it down because there are other people? It's not going anywhere? Well, there you go. He just admitted to doing it.
What? My name's on it. Of course I did. That has nothing
So you did do it. So you think it's okay to threaten someone?
So he admits to doing it.
And slash their tire.
And that's worth noting for what we're going to get at in a second.
I didn't do it.
So was it a joke?
Are your tires okay?
So does that make it? You know, it's a crime. It's a crime to threaten this. You understand that, right?
Okay, it's a crime.
Could you
to
take it down?
trespass.
Could you take it down?
No, it's a crime.
Could you take it down and just say, hey, listen, I don't really want to call actions to violence that people disagree.
I think it's time for you to go.
Part of being, come on, you want to play the part. Part of being a man is owning up to the actions.
Let's see, I love that little clip. This guy evidently is a FTM transgender. So he's saying, when he says you want to play the part, I think he's doing the whole, if you want to be a man, you have to own up to your actions.
Admitting what you did. They call the police? Well, good. I think they should call the police.
So they end up talking to the police, and the police take Crowder's police report, saying, hey, this guy threatened violence against us. So what happens just recently, and I'm not going to play the whole video, especially because we only have a couple minutes left of the show. Well, I'll let him speak for himself.
Do you consider yourself a journalist?
No.
Okay. What?
Do you?
Under this, sir, I do not appreciate the sarcasm.
Question of the day, where were you when you realized that journalism wasn't what you thought it was? It was probably me with Dan Rather forging documents. Mm-hmm. That was one, and now we're talking about fake news. When Walter Cronkite said, I believe the quote was, you can't be a reporter and not be somewhat of a liberal. I remember that hit me like just a blast of cold water, because we're about to show you an unedited interview with the writer of an article at the Austin Chronicle. I think Sven Computer has this as an overlay. It was an article written about the recent Crowder Confronts. Yep. About the video. Never featured the video, just riddled with inaccuracies.
Not to feature.
Yes. So we tried to reach this girl, and we weren't able to reach the author, and then she called us back, so that's what you're about to hear. Hey, here's the thing. It's not about the Austin Chronicle, right? I mean, I get it. Not many people read it. What it's about is the media at large. This has been going on. I've encountered this with Daily Beast, with Washington Post, with Sky News. You were there when we did this with Sky News. Yep. It's about the media getting away with this scot-free for so long, and we just can't. It's kind of like the Crowder Confronts. We just can't allow it to continue.
That's my answer. So
anyway, incredibly dishonest reporting on the part of Miss Jessie Cape of the Austin Chronicle. I encourage you to watch that video. Watch the Confront video, watch the Change My Mind video, and watch this follow video that they just released today. And you will learn a lot about leftist bias in media in this country. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Free Stater.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.